Yo, welcome to Expert Film Advice. I'm Deontay Jenkins, and here's what's on my mind. Paul Thomas Anderson is the greatest filmmaker of all time. Here's why. This is the first in an ongoing series discussing why some of the greatest filmmakers of all time are so great. As always, if you like the content on this channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up if you like this video, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you can be the first to know when a new video is being uploaded. Now that that's out of the way, Paul Thomas Anderson is a visual storyteller like no other. He combines an art house sensibility with a Hollywood flair. His films have grossed over $270 million at the box office, and he's been nominated for 8 Academy Awards. So check this out. Paul Thomas Anderson is an example of what every artist wants to be. He's like an underground musician who broke through to the mainstream while still doing whatever the he wants. His name is almost holy amongst film lovers, and he's accomplished all these things without even making a huge wave at the box office. His films are often deep and abstract and out of the ordinary. Sometimes his films are even unusual for his own filmography. No film shows this better than Anderson's style-blending masterpiece, Punch-Drunk Love. What happens when you take a renegade auteur and combine him with the irreverent and wacky comedy stylings of Adam Sandler? You'd get exactly what you'd expect. There's no other way to describe Punch-Drunk Love other than an art house Adam Sandler film. In fact, Paul described it as such himself in a 2002 interview with Roger Ebert when asked if he made a Paul Thomas Anderson film or an Adam Sandler film. In the same interview, Paul goes on to say this about Sandler films. I could watch them over and over and over again just from the pure joy that you can feel them putting into the making of the movie, which is the same joy that you can feel Robert Altman putting into the making of Nashville. And now hold on to that for a second. He goes on to later describe the underlying anger that he sees in Adam Sandler's work, describing an SNL sketch. He recalls it being like the whites of Adam Sandler's eyes turned black for a moment with rage before him snapping back out of it and allowing the audience to applaud him. The way Paul describes Adam Sandler films in this one sketch from Saturday Night Live shows one of his most underrated abilities, which is his ability to see beyond what's there. Paul knows that there's no difference between the making of a Robert Altman film and an Adam Sandler film. Just two artists and the palpable joy of them expressing themselves in the only way that they know how. And the way they know how is cinema. It shows that he truly understands what cinema is and how all forms can affect you on a deep personal level. Taking it a step further, showing that he understands what that Adam Sandler's moronic funny man shtick comes from a place of anger and hurt, shows that he comprehends what Adam Sandler is expressing artistically, not just what he's portraying on the screen. In fact, if you watch or read any Paul Thomas Anderson interview, you'd be hard-pressed to find him talking down on a film, a filmmaker, or a film genre. He always looks deeper and sees the artistic value in the work. And he applies this to his pictures too. Where we see a moron who expresses himself like a man-child, he sees a man who's been broken down by life and can't properly express his anger. We see an alcoholic who is easily influenced, and he sees a man who's lonely and looking for a crutch. We see a group of porn stars, he sees a group of outsiders looking for a family. Boogie Nights isn't his first film, but it's definitely the film where he announced to the world, "I am here!" And he did this with a fearless visual style that's been his trademark throughout his career. But there are two parts of Paul Thomas Anderson crafting an image. First, I like to call the young and the bold. During his first few films, his camera would fly through the scene, providing the audience with endless amounts of information, which matched his energized style of storytelling. For example, the opening shot of Boogie Nights may be the greatest opening shot of all time. We're like an omniscient fly zooming through this lifestyle of excess, self-indulgence, and blissful ignorance. This shot is exactly how the porn world is presented to our protagonist, Dirk Diggler, through the first half of the film. The shot is dreamy and hypnotic, which is exactly what Paul was going for. Paul once said that Steadicam is overused, but if you realize what it feels like, which is kind of dreamy and kind of floaty, and you apply that, you know that's what it's going to do, and you're using it right. Paul understands more than just when to move the camera or how to frame an image. He knows why. He has a mastery of the cinematic language, which he's taken from his influences, and he uses to portray an emotion or an idea. And that's visual storytelling. His earlier films were a lot more flashy and attention-grabbing and in-your-face, which matched the style of story that he was telling. But that brings us to Paul's more recent work. This is what I like to call the mature and masterful. Starting with There Will Be Blood, Paul's camera becomes more refined, his composition becomes more precise, and his camera movement less noticeable. If Paul was expressing the omniscience of the audience with his first few films, he's expressing his godlike omnipresence as a storyteller with his later few. This is a master crafting a piece of art and knowing he's in full control of it. Compare these two long takes from Magnolia and There Will Be Blood. Both show a total mastery of visual form and storytelling, and an understanding of the story being told. More importantly, they express what the audience needs to see and feel. There are few directors that can compose an image as well as Paul Thomas Anderson, and even fewer that know when, where, and why to move the camera in a way that's in service to the characters and the story that's being told. Almost as if to flex his visual storytelling muscles, Paul made a 14-minute silent film at the beginning of There Will Be Blood to set the table for Daniel Plainview and who he is. Paul's visuals express something that words can't. Whether he's letting a camera fly through the scene or making the camera be still so the scene can breathe, it shows a mastery of visual storytelling and a mastery of his craft. He's probably the most meticulous visual storyteller since Stanley Kubrick himself, but he does so in a way that never feels isolating to the audience. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, punch yourself in the face because you're not watching enough Paul Thomas Anderson films. Go check them out. Paul has been lauded as one of the greats by filmmakers and audiences alike, but not everyone is so quick to say Paul is that great. In an article with moviesnink.com, Kristen Abbatiello raises an interesting question about Paul. Is Paul Thomas Anderson a great filmmaker while simultaneously being a bad storyteller? He goes on to use Phantom Thread as an example, saying, "What is it that we should take away from the movie? That an obsessive artist needs to be reined in by their significant others with the help of toxins? That being emotionally abusive in a relationship is not good? That assholes are meanie heads and need to be literally bedridden before they stop being meanie heads? What's the story and why does it need to be told?" Very interesting points Kristen has brought up, but hold on to that. In an Entertainment Weekly article entitled Why I Fell Out of Love with Paul Thomas Anderson, Owen Gleiberman said this: "I can't escape the feeling that something has gone wrong in his work. And while there is now a cult for Paul Thomas Anderson, and a great many fans who just think he's God, critical problem for me is that one of the people that now think Paul Thomas Anderson is God is Paul Thomas Anderson." The article goes on to say, There Will Be Blood establishes its central character Daniel Plainview as a deeply unscrupulous and manipulative psychopath, a tycoon crackpot obsessed with oil and money at the expense of everything else within this first 40 minutes. Basically, he acts the exact same way and he does the same immoral thing in scene after scene after scene. Not to be overly lowbrow, but where's the arc in that? Both of these articles bring up an interesting point of view of Paul Thomas Anderson post Boogie Nights. You should definitely check them out, link in the description. But Kristen and Owen actually bring up points that are in Paul's favor. He's an unusual storyteller, often bending, breaking, and shifting the usual narrative structure and making them his own. Sometimes ignoring them altogether. Sometimes his arcs don't feel like arcs at all. His films often aren't questions, but statements about the characters. Now, I'll tell you why I disagree and think this adds to Paul's brilliance. This shows that Paul understands something that most writers don't. To quote Jay-Z, "You was who you was before you got here," which means there is no actual change in a character. There are no arcs. Your character is exactly who they are at the beginning of the film as who they are at the end of the film. The only thing that changes is their circumstances. The audience is the one who goes on the journey. The audience experiences the arcs, not the characters. Paul doesn't tell you stories about characters. He creates characters and lets them live within a story. So yes, Daniel Plainview stays the same in There Will Be Blood, but that's the point. And in Phantom Thread, he doesn't show a change in Reynolds Woodcock. He shows both Reynolds and Alma exactly who they are, two totally different people whose circumstances have brought them together, and how those circumstances affect the both of them. Now let's wrap this up. Paul Thomas Anderson is a cinematic genius that combines complex character writing with flawless visuals. He tells stories about loneliness and anger and family and toxic masculinity without ever being heavy-handed or hammering you over the head with meaning. He's a writer-director that knows when to control his audience and when to let go. And if you really pay attention to his films, you'll see some of the most teachable moments in visuals, depth, and character writing. And that's why Paul Thomas Anderson is the greatest filmmaker of all time. But what do I know? I'm no expert. Thank you guys for watching. As always, this has been Inexpert Film Advice, and I'm Deontay Jenkins. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Like, share, and subscribe. Or I said like already, so share and subscribe. And you can follow me here on social media. And once again, I am Deontay Jenkins, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
Mr. Daniel? I'm finished.